agreed to voluntarily cut supply by about 2.2 million barrels per day, helping Russian idea of reversing the sanctions imposed on the Russian oil trade. And this is in line with Putin's drive to bolster ties with the Gulf and other West Asian states in an attempt to demonstrate that West's attempt to isolate Russia has failed. Nearly 16,000 Palestinians have been killed and over 3/4 of Gaza's 2.3 million residents have been displaced during this war, who are running out of safe places to go now.
Israel says it targets Hamas operatives and blames civilian casualties on the militants, accusing them of operating in residential neighborhoods.
Israeli bombing campaigns have Gaza families on the edge. They are packing up and fleeing, heading for a pocket of land further south, already crammed with displaced people and without enough food, water or toilets. Now, some are fleeing for the third or even the fourth time in less than 2 months. The new phase of displacement since a week-long truce ended on December 1st is aggravating an already catastrophic humanitarian situation. The World Health Organization says that the situation in Gaza is getting worse by the hour.
The situation is getting worse by the hour. I mean, like there's intensified bombing going on all around, including here in the southern areas, Khan Yunis, and even in Rafah. Even what I've seen over the last couple of days, that we see an vastly increasing number of IDPs coming from the so-called middle area and even now the southern areas towards furthermore to the south.
In Khan Yunis, in southern Gaza, Israel is launching a long-awaited assault. Palestinians who sought protection by camping in the grounds of Nasser Hospital were seen rolling up their tents and loading cars or donkey carts with mats and blankets. Rafah, further south on the border with Egypt, is one of the last remaining areas where the Israeli military has said civilians could go to escape the fighting. However, it has been hit by many airstrikes. Displaced people in Rafah say their living conditions are horrible, with no place to eat, wash or pray. Khan Yunis was home to 381,000 people before the Israel-Hamas war. As per UN, another 245,000 people displaced by Israel's bombardment of the northern part of Gaza have been sheltering there in 71 different locations. Now, the Israeli army has called for residents to evacuate to 3 designated areas in the Rafah governorate. Those areas are already packed with 280,000 residents and 470,000 displaced people who arrived after the war started on the 7th of October. The ability of the UN and partners to provide assistance in the region is already critically challenged. US State Department stated that Israel is not doing enough to allow more fuel and aid into Gaza and should step up efforts.
The level of assistance that's getting in is not sufficient. It needs to go up, and we've made that clear to the government of Israel. The level of fuel that is going in is not sufficient. It needs to go up, and we have made that clear to the government of Israel.
In a call with Benjamin Netanyahu, UK's Prime Minister expressed his disappointment about the breakdown of the pause in fighting in Gaza. Rishi Sunak stressed the need for Israel to take greater care to protect civilians in Gaza and for humanitarian aid to be allowed to enter the Palestinian enclave. The Hamas-run health ministry stated a strike on South Gaza school killed at least 25 people.
And the hostage situation in the war in West Asia remains grim. The truce between Israel and Hamas militants, it gave a ray of hope for those captured during the October 7th attacks by Hamas. But since the truce ended on the 1st of December, the world leaders are attempting to resume negotiations, although there might be a setback in their attempts. after new allegations made by Israel on hostages being drugged and of sexual violence committed against women during the October 7th attack on Israel. Let's read more about this latest claim made by Israel. Well, according to Israel's health ministry, Hamas militants drugged the hostages who were released during the ceasefire. Well, they said that they did so because they wanted the captives to look happy during their transfer to the Red Cross in Gaza. Well, Israeli ministry officials told the lawmakers at a hearing of the Knesset Health Committee that the captives were tranquilized as a part of the militant group's propaganda to make it seem like the hostages were treated well. Moreover, according to the head of the health ministry's medical division, the hostages were administered a drug called clanzapam. Now, this drug, it is a mood-enhancing drug used to treat seizures and panic disorders. This was a drug which was given to the Hamas captives. Now, there are more disturbing allegations made by Israel. Well, according to reports, an Israeli women's rights campaigner, sexual assault was also a part of an atrocities-filled rampage by Hamas and other Gaza militants. They say that they saw footage of women in several locations whose condition left them in no doubt that they had been raped multiple times. Israeli police say that they have so far gathered more than 1,500 testimonies from witnesses and medics regarding this. Let's now take a listen to the head of Israel's women's rights group on what she says about the disturbing allegations of sexual violence on the Hamas militants made by Israel. Take a listen.
The denial of the atrocities committed by Hamas on Israeli women by women's organizations around the world is a denial not only of our humanity, but of the values that we have all worked so hard to bring to light. As a woman who's not only Israeli, but also American, and also heads a women's rights organization, it is shocking and deeply painful to have other women's organizations not recognize what has happened to us, not share in our pain, and not share in our stories. It needs to change now.
And after campaigners in Israel alleged the gender-based violence during the Hamas attack, US President Joe Biden has called for global condemnation of what he said was horrific sexual violence by Hamas. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he had heard stories of sexual abuse at a meeting with hostages returned by Hamas. And while addressing women's rights and human rights organizations over alleged sexual violence by Hamas, Netanyahu says, "Where the hell are you?" Well, we just took a look at the allegations made by Israel. Now, let's tell you about the allegations made by released Palestinians who allege of mistreatment in Israeli prisons, released under a prisoner-hostage exchange between Israel and the Hamas militants. Well, former Palestinian detainees, they describe their stay at the Israel prisons, which was endured with beatings, deprivation, and a radical worsening in conditions in Israeli jails. The released women prisoners, they also claim that they were denied basic needs which they require for themselves. And despite the daunting conditions described by both Israelis and Palestinians, it's been over a month since the war has been going on, which started on October 7th. That is when Hamas attacked Israel. They took with them around 240 people. Hostages from Israel were taken by the Hamas militants and are held hostage in Gaza. The hostages are from more than 40 countries, and they include people from all ages, from a child to an elderly. They are among the hostages who have been held captives by the Hamas militants. Of these 240 hostages taken in by Hamas militants on October 7th, around 105 Gaza hostages have been released so far. And this was during the Qatar-mediated truce, which ended on Friday. Meanwhile, Israel released around 240 jailed Palestinians. They were released under the hostage prisoner swap, which was again mediated by Qatar. And the latest from the Israel-Hamas war. Israel says it has now further expanded its ground operations in Gaza. It is operating in multiple Hamas strongholds, both in northern and in the southern Gaza Strip. As a result, the Gaza Strip continues to be under intense Israeli bombings.
אנחנו הנחינו את צה"ל להמשיך במלחמה. לוחמינו מרחיבים את הפעילות הקרקעית נגד חמאס בכל מקום ברצועה, כולל בדרום הרצועה.
Well, the IDF says it has been operating in Hamas strongholds in the areas of Jabalia, Shujaiya and Khan Younis, where it has destroyed militant infrastructure and also eliminated Hamas militants. The army says that they have gained control of central Hamas positions in Jabalia over the past day, as well as located weapons and terrorist infrastructure, some of which was found in civilian buildings, including a school. Now, as the Israeli offensive expands to southern Gaza, the city of Khan Younis is particularly witnessing huge devastation at the moment. The IDF described the past day as the most intense day of combat in 5 weeks of ground operations against the Hamas militants.